I wanted to address some of the stories that have been being out there with what's going on the planet regarding scientists and people in certain communities that seem to be maybe targeted or being more affected, or that there's something nefarious going on with them. And we have to start looking at the pattern recognition of things that go on in the news. We know that when there's a shooting, let's say in a school shooting or a mass shooting, let's say in the US, and the news makes such a big to do over it, and a bunch of people go into fear around it, there's generally a few more. And there's a creation energy activated around it. And the same things with wars, right? We've now been focused on them and we're creating more. And luckily, though, the light is winning. There's so much light coming in that a lot of these stories are coming up, being seen and being wrapped up, right? And hopefully that's it. And we don't have to keep activating them. We saw it with fires, right? And just different things. You start looking for the patterns, and don't allow yourself to go into fear, so you're not contributing to the momentum of those stories having to play out. The same thing with the scientific stuff, right? The scientists leaving. There's I have a few different theories around that, but the more we notice them, the more some of them might just end up having to, like that. Some of those souls might have signed up to take one for the team, because whenever you are believing something, it has to show up. So it's who's going to show up for you? Not if there's some unknown scientist in some little community somewhere that nobody's known about, it's not going to be talked about. So it's going to be public figure scientists, and all those people that are holding that belief system, because again, that's where their energy is going. They're creating, and you get to be right in your reality. So, enough of us has to be on that other side where we're neutralizing that creation energy. So I'm not saying that I don't see that timeline, because I do. Everything has timeline potentials. If you've thought something, they say there's a timeline for it, right? But because like attracts like in the field, and it's going to go out, and a whole bunch of people are going to be thinking these things, and it's going to show up for the people that believe in it the most, right? But if I thought it, but I never gave it any currency beyond that, let's say I read something in a book and I went, oh, that's really interesting, and then I let it go and I forgot about it. It's not necessarily going to be active in my field. I don't have to face that creation there, because it didn't get a lot of my currency, right? So, but if there's lifetimes and lifetimes before where I interacted with that energy, it may have enough momentum to show up, and I've got that point of attraction active in me because I did read that book. So, so it got activated that way. That's the thing. Not everything from every past is going to show up in this lifetime. It usually has some sort of a triggering event, right? Or, you grow, you expand your consciousness a little bit, and then we've got, these new time capsules, right? Because once you expand, you suddenly you're expanding your database. People could call them soul retrievals, but what it is you're actually merging with your soul extensions, right? And this is your consciousness is, right? You are drawing from a bigger database of your higher self, your soul lineage, that sort of thing. Everything's all happening outside time and space at once, right? So it's there. That's why, just so don't get too heady about what that looks like, because there's a version of you living somewhere, blah, 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 that doesn't look like this. And when you expand and you've merged with that consciousness, their codes is what's active. So that's when people suddenly have to do shadow work, right? Or they maybe they get a past life reading and they find out that this lifetime over here is the one that's bleeding in and affecting you most right now, right? That sort of thing. So again, they're just time capsules, right? It's like energy that you were coded to, there's always potentials. There's not a guarantee that every time capsule is going to activate. Lots of them, and I would say probably more of them are good than the bad ones, but probably a balance actually. But you have to go through those growth, lessons. You actually, and then you just keep calling them in and integrate, right? And the more you integrate, right, the more you get to move on and choose again, because you've got no more pulls and distortions where you're bleeding and leaking energy, right? So getting back to the timeline stuff with the scientists, there is something that those scientists came in to do in this lifetime, and they, like artists and like spiritual people, they're pushing on the fringe of consciousness. So we have framework in our minds of how this earth works and how reality works, and it's fixed for most people, and they're it's really hard to teach an old dog a new trick, right? Because they've already got decided how the world works, right? So for those of us that can play in those maybes, what ifs, or is there more to this, right? That kind of thing. Those that can ask those hard questions, or they're the ones that are on the fringe, and they're part of the expansion team. So they are going in areas that have, I'm going to say, shakier foundations, right? Because it hasn't been built out there yet. They're going to encounter a lot more resistance in their life, right? It's more friction, right? But the sand and the oyster, right? They're going to start bringing the gifts of just them questioning reality as these scientists, right? In the way we were told, right? And exploring and asking questions that are making other people uncomfortable, that sort of thing, right? Really served us, really served our expansion. And but if we're creating the new earth, and we know the new earth is here, right? It's here. It's just, are we able to let go of the old conditions, the old programs, the old expectations enough where we can start stepping more firmly? Because again, it's just the radio tuner, right? Bandwidth, right? Can I stay there in that high frequency without getting dropped down to the old stuff? The more I can stay there in the new bandwidth. And once I get there and I can sustain myself and get some momentum, I might start experiencing the world a lot different, right? It might start looking a lot like I'm seeing things that look really strange to me right now. And I'm not losing it though, right? It's like, because I know there's a lot of people also kind of going, well, that looked kind of weird, right? Is that, we're seeing just kind of surreal stories, like restaurant businesses are looking a bit odd, and jobs for people, those we could have never predicted any of this. Fashion, some of it looks like some of that, the new fashion, I swear, is clown shoes and clown clothes and clown cosmetics. The people are starting to look really strange. And I'm not trying to go into any judgment for it, but they are also part of the pushing the boundaries of the norm, right? But some of those people that were pushing the boundaries, they're going to get so far where their soul has nothing more to do. It's like, I've done my job. I've already fixed it, or created this. And then they're going to hit the edge of their of what their character was playing in our scripts. That doesn't mean there's not still active in other scripts. They might have scripts where they are going to live to some great old age in this beautiful reality that they've created, whether it's around disclosure, whether it's around free energy, whether it's around, we don't know, and that's, that whole butterfly effect is really interesting, because a friend of mine, her husband actually created the first script, and he tried to sell it. He's a neurologist, and he tried to sell it, and they turned him down. And next thing you know, there's a movie created. And I don't know if that's for me to say or not, but anyways, he had his intellectual property stolen there. So I know a neurologist came up with that idea. So it really landed scientific possibilities for that. And then, the parallel universe is another scientific, quantum mechanics and quantum physics are really telling us that if you can think it, it's out there rippling somewhere, right? But we do have a sum of our parts of an expectation of the reality that we're operating within. And those, some of us are able to start loosening the framework there and start going, what if, and not getting so caught up in the evidence to keep showing up as the same evidence or the same the laws of the physics. Even that's what I play with, that kind of playground where I know them and I'm honoring them, and that was a reality we created, and I get that. But do we have to die on that mountain? No, I'm okay if we can shift up and hold our heart coherence and get into that next dimension of our consciousness. It might look quite different. And I'll tell you why I'm holding this space for these timelines where these other people are, existing in other parallel realities where they didn't have to leave, right? Because I lost somebody as well. And I keep thinking, maybe there's a reality. She shifted in her dimension. And in that dimension, even if her physical body isn't here, but maybe it is in that other dimension. And when we finally shift there, it might take us a long time. We finally shift there, we realize, oh, we're all here, right? We don't know what that looks like, right? So, there's a lot of talking about heaven on earth. Well, they say your loved ones go to heaven. Well, what is heaven on earth then, right? So I'm just going to hold that space. Again, I'm not going to decide how it's going to happen, whether it's going to happen, because when we get our minds and get too heady about things and not in our hearts, right? We don't realize how we're actually limiting the energy, because there's maybe so many potentials, but our thoughts and expectations might, cut them down to maybe, 1/8 of the potentials, because this is kind of what we're available for in our minds, right? So you got to get out of your mind, right? Get out of our minds, which, oh gosh, that sounds crazy. So, and that's why, okay, getting back to these scientists, that's why some of them did sound so crazy. Like my heart went out to David Wilcox, and I watched one of his last videos, and I have to say, because I've never watched his videos and I'm not part of his community, he did look a little crazy at the end. And I'm not judging, because I too could look, somebody watching these videos, if they have no framework for understanding anything I'm saying, I'm going to sound the same way to them. And so maybe I might not be in somebody else's chosen future reality, right? In their reality, because this information has no value to them, right? And they think that people like me are maybe because I channel energy right through me, and so they think it's demonic or something, so they're going to deny the light, and it's not going to show up in their reality, because their timeline, let's say they're holding light and they've chosen a different reality. They're going to Jesus or whatever, and it's the one branch on the tree. So I don't know what my caricature, this avatar version, this of me is, whether it's even going to be able to show up for them, because they haven't chosen to experience me in that next dimension of their consciousness, right? So, it's really interesting when we start playing there. It's like, we got to stop the sorting, stop the deciding who goes and who doesn't. And I had to realize that even I still had some reservations around the disclosure piece. And I went, how many of us believe that, and all the stuff that David was saying, right, that it has a possibility of being true? And so if most people said no, there's no energetic currency for his soul to have a lot of space to keep creating. So he kind of was running up against, he would have hit a lot of friction and resistance, right? And so energetically, there's no support for him to keep going. So, yeah, so I can see why he, at the end was having some troubles, right? And because there's too many people that were just not available for where he was, what branch of the tree he was trying to expand out on. But those of us that now can hold these higher conscious spaces, and we know that he served everybody serves, every person, every soul on the planet, doesn't matter what they're doing, is serving in some way. Even if it's not obvious to me, I usually now can go in and look at their life and find a way where, okay, that was developing this, because whatever it is that they were serving, even if it looks dark, they're holding space for its opposite, right? So darkness, and I'm not talking about David, I'm talking about just in general, let's say Putin, somebody that you go, oh my gosh, he's a blah, 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 or whatever, some dictator that you don't like, and you think it's really dark, right? Its opposite is actually able to exist because of him, right? So that's the thing. Darkness has to exist for the light, right? So it all is serving, right? It's just not obvious to us all the time. So when a soul hits the limit of what they can do in the call it the consensus reality, right? It's probably going to exit, right? Because it's not serving what maybe it came in to serve. But the consensus reality, I don't know how many of them are there, right? Right? How many spheres of influence are there where there's a consensus within that sphere? So your soul pod, your tribe, your people that you came in, we don't know how many people in this earth that I'm currently interacting in are on my exact timeline. And does it matter? No, I have to let it go, that because that's, even timeline is a mental construct, isn't it? It's we're quantum. I want to get to the place where I'm time traveling. I want to get to the place where I can go forward and back, and I can I'm unlimited in that way. And I'm going to tell you a story. This is quite different than the scientist stuff, but not. It's so interesting because they were playing in potentials and possibilities, and they were trying to expand the playground, right, and asking again difficult questions, right, questions that we didn't have answers for, right, necessarily, or that were inconvenient, and because the mainstream wasn't ready to accept them, so they get buried. That's the thing. Your consciousness has to be ready to hold what they were creating. That's why Tesla, his work it was too far ahead of its time. The collective was still stuck in the power over other structure, so it was never going to allow that free energy, right? So he ran, his soul did what it could do. And once a soul realizes there's nothing further it can do here, I can serve more in my death, because all these people that are believing that the scientists are, being, taken out, I might serve more there than keep running up against a wall within my, existing framework, right? And maybe in his death, or her death, right, that their work might all of a sudden have more significance. So we don't know. Again, it's just not to get too um, um, yeah, be loose with the meaning of all this stuff, right? And walk it around. I always say I use the round table, right? And put the death in the middle, and go to every seat on the table, right? And see it from as many potentials. It serves this person this way. It serves this person this way. It serves this person this way. And then you can go, wow, thank you, right? What a gift that was, right? So that's the thing. I did that with my daughter's death. I had to do it and see it from all these different angles, and then I could see why her soul, could see where it could contribute its greatest value, right? So, because every person, came in to have an experience, and this is the other thing. I see there's a lot of people that are really mad about, defunding the police, and defunding schools, and all this kind of stuff, and they see it all as bad, right? But in the new reality, let's say where we're, creating that heaven on earth, will we need policemen, right? Probably not. I can't imagine. So the more people we have right now that are policemen that rely on an income, have an expectation to show up to work and do a job, and have an expectation of crime, of, whatever cases they have to solve, or whatever it is, or corruption, whatever it is that they do in a day, they show up with an expectation of what that job entails, and they're needed, and they go and do that day in, day out, day in, day out, right? It's, how do we get off that treadmill? Because they are creating, from a place of expectation, more crime, more corruption, more, whatever it is that they do every day, has to show up, because there's a whole bunch of them that have signed up to create from there. So the defunding of them, sounds horrible, because we're kind of going, oh, we're not going to be safe, right? And maybe there's some truth, but stop deciding you're not going to be safe too, right? And stop. Let's just see and acknowledge that in these higher realms of consciousness that we're expanding into, right? And, everyone's going to say popcorn pops at its own, not all at once. So who knows when everyone's popcorn's going to pop, right? So it's a bit scary right now, because some people that haven't, they're not in this higher expanded state. They're going into fear around, the defending of the police or whatever it is. And I'm just using these random stories, right? But every story can be looked at in that way, going, is this a job we need in a enlightened society? So that's the thing. So, the whole friction around, if the conspiracy jobs, even the conspiracy theorists, are they going to be needed in an enlightened society? So a lot of those souls that are in those jobs that, it was a playground that was needed at the time, because a lot of people operated from their lower victim mentality. They were contracted in states of fear. And so those jobs were needed, right? That was part of the structure, right? We wanted to come in and expand and explore that playground, and lots of contrasts there, right? And it was exciting. It's like, you go to a movie, you don't go to a movie to watch a man on a boat fishing, well, maybe on Golden Pond was probably a rare one, but you usually go to the movies for some, action and activity and excitement, right? So that's kind of the same. So we created a lot from there. So once a soul has fulfilled its contracts and what it set out to do, it may drop the physical body, right? And but in that new higher state of consciousness where we're going, right? I think they're all going to be there, right? Because they can't separate. There's no separation, right? They're all within us, but their physicality isn't, right? So their consciousness is there. So obviously when I go there, I'm expecting my expanded consciousness is going to have more ways to connect and to communicate, we'll say there. And maybe they can, okay. And I'm going to say maybe they can actually, like Jesus, formed a body or whatever it is, or animated the body, the reanimated, resurrection, right? And that maybe that will happen for them, or maybe it'll just be a body of light, and who knows how that'll show up for us. It might look different for everybody, we know when angels came onto the earth that, some people saw them as, flames and, burning bushes, or, wings in the sky. There's a lot of different ways that people experienced it. So, and that was from the lower reality, the dense reality. So when we can activate more and more of our light bodies, what are we available for to experience the mass? So just play with that. Just be open and available, and not and kind of get out of your box that way. And one more story I was about to share was, and I talked about it in another video that I didn't know if I would share this because it's kind of out there. I had a reading years ago with a couple before I was doing any of my own coding, and it was a consciousness reading, and they had named 5 of my guides, and since I have named others, but the 5 that they named was really interesting. One of them was Babaji, and Babaji is known to his, we'll say his spiritual followers, right, to show up for his followers in magical ways, right? And because he never left, he didn't die. He just picks up his body, and that's his gift, right? He's mastered the art of, you could call it teleportation, but I don't even know if it's that. He can just show up. So I had an experience that at the time I didn't give it a lot of credence. It was kind of unusual. It was about 2 months before COVID. I think it was about shut everything down, maybe 3 months. January, it was so funny. We checked into our hotel room in Sedona, January 11th, 2020. And we were given a room key, 111. And then we checked into our room, and it happened to be 111 because we checked in early that day. So my husband and I were laughing because at all these 111s. Well, our bill at the restaurant that night was 111. And we kept having, I mean, it's crazy. But anyways, we had a week in Sedona. And it was pretty magical and beautiful. And my last day, my husband went golfing on the last day, and I was in some little shops, in the upper village, I think. And there's an outdoor courtyard, and I go into these little shops, and I had just had lunch in the food court, and I was walking towards this little crystal shop, and this man comes up to me, and he puts out his hand, and he shakes my hand, and he goes, "Hi, and for the life of me, I can't remember whether he said Red Eagle or Red Cloud or something like that. It was an indigenous name, but the name wasn't. It probably, if I should have remembered it, because it probably had some metaphorical kind of. There was some significance there, and maybe it'll drop in. Okay, I'm just going to ask my teams to assist me in helping me come up with that name. That would be really nice. Can I be shown that name? And so he shakes my hand, and I just remember feeling I'm a woman alone, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking he's not greeting anyone else, right? Why me? And I felt pretty singled out, right? And I wasn't coding yet. So this is the thing. I wasn't, in my mind, like I was just part of these meditation groups that I was doing quietly in my hometown, but I wasn't part of the big spiritual community in any way. So I was still playing small, and I could not figure out why he was coming up to me and shaking my hand. And so I was a little bit kind of spooked, right? So I just went, oh, nice to meet you. I'm Deborah or something. Maybe I didn't even give him my name. I don't know if I gave him my name, because I know, when you're in Vegas, I had some guy get really friendly to me in Vegas one time, and the security guard came over and told me, don't give him any information. So anyway, so that was playing in my head, not to tell this guy any details. And so I just was kind and said, oh, thank you, nice to meet you or something. And that was it. And I walked away, and I went into the crystal shop. And I get into the crystal shop, and the woman in the shop had said something to me about, it was so strange. She said, if you open up your field, you would learn a lot. That's what she said. And I had been meditating, 5 days a week for a year and a half. And I remember kind of going, or maybe a year at that point. It was about a year, actually. No, 2 years, because Janelle had passed in 2018. So 2019. Yeah, just over a year. Anyways, and so she said that to me. It was so strange. And I kind of walked around, I'm looking, and I kind of just smiled and thank you. And at one point she comes over and she gives me her card, and she said, I don't want to lose track of you. And so I kind of looking at this, she goes, you're a really interesting cookie. And she goes, I'm writing a book on, and she kind of explained it. I didn't understand grid working back then. And it was a bit about that. And she gave me her card and wanted to keep in touch. Well, I've put it somewhere. We've moved twice since then, and so I don't know where it ended up. But the funny thing is, not that long ago, I think it was last summer, actually, I was listening to the autobiography of a yogi on audio as I'm driving in my car. And the story about the Babaji visiting, I knew in that moment that I had to reframe that visit in Sedona, because when I basically Googled Babaji at some point, and I saw photos of him. And as I'm driving along, it occurs to me that he looks just like that guy. And I mean, he wasn't going to introduce himself as Babaji. Well, maybe he would have. I don't know. But anyways, but I wasn't a vibrational match to understand the significance of that visit. And I got COVID that night. That's the crazy thing. I blamed him because I that night I started sweating. I got a fever, and my teeth were chattering. And we were going to Phoenix the next day, and I was flying home the next day after that. So I just said to my husband, just drive me to a hotel room and you sightsee in Phoenix, because I wasn't well. And I spent that whole day not being sick. And then I sat in an airport waiting, to take my flight. I didn't know, because COVID wasn't it was still in China. That was all we knew at that point. So I didn't even occur to me to think that it was COVID, but I'm sitting in an airport, right? Anyways, I had my Kindle, I'm reading my book, and I'm just not feeling great. And I don't take anything when I get flus, because anyway, so I got home that night. I'm home by myself because I left my husband in Phoenix, and I made tea, and so it was maybe 2 days of kind of feeling sorry for myself, and that was it, and it was done. But I blamed either the guy shaking me his hand, right, gave me something, or I had one experience where I was visiting a vortex and I touched a tree and I dropped in, and I basically came back and I was off kilter, and I had to reground and regroup. And the tree shifted something in me, and then I got sick that night. So I couldn't decide who I was mad at, right? Which is really funny. So, but neither one of them. And that's the thing. I probably got the flu on my flight going right there, but it just took, the week to show up. Who knows, right? It just doesn't even matter, because it was a gift. I got it, and I never had to. I never felt compelled to take any shots, because I knew I had the immunity. I knew that I had natural immunity. I got it, and I'd gone through it, and I was okay. So, but the thing is now I look back and I realize I was given an opportunity to see that visit and to revisit it in my mind and go, could it have been Babaji? And I felt into that, and I go into a meditation, and I knew that, because I'm quantum, that I could, and I did. I was at that moment, and I, in my meditation, thanked Babaji for showing up for me, right? And then I come back out, and I come out of it, and I realize that the energy, because he's with me, he's within me, and that mirror that man showed up for me in that way. I'm not saying Babaji lives in that man's body all the time, but in that moment, that man, as part of our cooperative system, got the nudge to come and introduce himself. And I saw him, and I remember thinking he looks awfully like Babaji, right? And now I look, and then a year later, or whenever I start thinking this way, a couple of years later, I started kind of wondering. But it wasn't until I heard the audiobook where I went, yeah, that was Babaji. Anyways, it took me a while to get there. It took me a while of realizing, if I'm not available for it to have been Babaji, what doors have I just shut? What permissions have I disallowed to be real? Where have I shut down Deborah's ability to be quantum? Where have I shut down Deborah's ability to be a co-creator with my family of light? Where have I shut down the possibility that my God presence wasn't standing in Sedona, running around, showing up, going, hey, what do you think? And then I got to go on this end, go, cool, thank you for showing up for me like that, right? And so the thing is, it's all negotiations. I'm not saying it has to be that. I'm not going to die on a mountain and say that that's exactly what that is. It's not really the point. The point is Can I allow myself to be multidimensional enough to be tapped in and flowing with source light and love flowing through me, flowing into Gaia in such a beautiful divine way that those sort of miracles can be every day, right? And I did a video earlier about how this ring dropped out of the air for me. Yeah, I don't know what I'll call the video, but hopefully you can get a chance to see it. I've and I forgot all about it. And lately I realized I had to start acknowledging these gifts. If I don't, like literally it dropped out of the air, and I'll show it again. Let's see if it shows up better this time. Oh, no, it's not. It's my camera. There. Isn't that interesting that showed up? It's got a pentagram on it, and it's copper. But it showed me the 5 elements that I work with, right? And the metals that I work with, right? That I was working with at the time, right? Anyways, that's another story. But we've got these magical stories. I could talk my way out of them from being magical, or I can activate those pathways so that that becomes my reality. That this is how I show up in the world. I am part of that magical system of consciousness that doesn't have those limitations. The playground where a lot of those scientists were playing, that were breaking down the boundaries and exploring and asking those questions, and sometimes it's just through friction. They're sand in the oysters, some of them, right? But it doesn't matter. It's the same way. It's like we have to allow things to be more than what we're seeing, what we're presenting. And I'm not saying get ungrounded, because that's not going to serve anybody, right? And and don't create an identity around it. That's another thing too, right? All the identities we're having, and you can see it happening in the collective right now. There's a big ego death going on right now. Everyone's shadow is coming up to be seen. The gurus are falling. It really is. You really do have to check your ego, right? And ego, identity, personality, the character that you think you've signed up to be, and maybe it's only part of the story, and you've got a bigger expression waiting to come online, but you haven't let go of this other one yet. So that's the thing. We have to learn to adapt and let go and transform and be fluid and not be fixed about any of it. So this version of Deborah, this account may, be shut down at some point, because I don't even need to share anymore. I don't, who knows? So I'm not getting caught up in any sort of an identity with this, but I'm allowing myself to have been magical enough in that moment, and quantum enough, and timeline jumping enough, because I do that. I know I'm timeline jumping too. That's another magical story, my whole kangaroo story. And that was another one with, but again, you just, you don't want to go to it's the lid on the flea, the glass with the flea in it jumping, and there's a lid on it, and the flea hits it, and then when you take the lid off, it's still doing that. The lid's off, right? We don't want to be stuck anymore. We really do want to. It doesn't mean we're going to go far, right? We might just jump up and then come down, but boy, how exciting is it when we got out of it, So that's the thing, and that's where we're going. Like, even I talked about the moon landing at one point like this, where it's like, yeah, we can be critical of it and skeptical, and the evidence kind of looks a little sketchy, right? But do I want to live in a reality where that's not possible, right? Is that a limitation I'm gonna, insist on in my timeline? And what else am I shutting down, right? What dream in that story? Because that's all. We know everything's energy. So all the stories are, like, every dimension has their stories, right? And some of them, because we're stuck in the dimension we're in, we don't believe them as being real anymore, because the Olympians or whatever, we don't think they're real because they're not in this dimension, right? Or the we know there was dragons, we know there's a fairy realm, right? So that's the thing, when we decide this is the only reality, we don't even have the ability to work with the other ones because we've closed the doors there. So your world gets small, right? And yeah, so I've talked a lot about this. I can actually feel, it's funny that something's coming in my throat. Maybe that's coming up to be cleared there. Yeah, I'll probably have a meditation around that. But just speaking your truth, and maybe that's what it was about. Maybe me even sharing that story gets other people a chance to start breaking through there and speaking their truth and their stories, and go, you know what, I don't know what happened there, but maybe, who knows, right? And then, but then you can sit, and if you're a meditator, go into a meditation and ask what that's about. And if it feels good and it's empowering for it to have worked out in that magical way that, again, maybe Babaji visited you or something, then feel into the energy of it. That's the key. I can re-know the energy of that experience. And that's, so the cord of attachment to the memory is not dense anymore. The fear of, this guy that, I don't know, why did he introduce himself? That kind of thing. That energy has been re-known now to a, ooh, cool. Because there's only this now moment, right? This is only, everything else, it's like they're now moments. So when I want to attach to that story as a now moment, I get to re-know the energy of it. So I'm hoping that that makes sense, right? That we can, when we go there in our consciousness, that I know it's a now moment, and I know that it's active and alive right there in that now moment, in my visitation there. And yeah, we can do all sorts of things like that. It's just not known and not talked about. And so yeah, so learn a little bit more about this if it's interesting to you, because it changes the playground. It changes your, this, a lot of people are waking up thinking the world isn't real, and they're depressed about it, and there's an apathy because they don't see people as, like, things become more meaningless there. That's depression, right? Because it's like, they've been gaslit, or their life has no meaning because their purpose is now gone because it can't be held in this reality. And so, yeah, so we want to wake up to a new playground where, what are we going to create now with it, right? Because the old stories of creation, they a lot of them will hit their wall, right? And we're going to probably see a lot of people exiting in different ways that are not going to take their stories and their identities and their created realities any further, right? Into the higher dimension. Again, might be active in other timelines, right? But if it's not in ours, yeah, that there's probably a reason for it. So yeah, but play with your unlimitedness, and sending you love. It's funny, this is collapsing stuff. Whenever I'm doing this, I'm bringing stuff together and it's being dissolved. So that was probably something that was coming in there. So yeah, whatever it was, there might have been judgment from somebody. Somebody might have had a bit of judgment around that story. And I'm an energy sensitive enough, oh, what's coming in there, that I would have felt it. And so it probably got collapsed. So I'm just going to breathe in some light and love, and I'm going to ask our teams to assist us in speaking our truth and experiencing divine truth, experiencing the gifts of creation, and without any limitation, with freedom and divine balance and alignment, and creativity and imagination, joy, fulfillment, peace and love. Okay. Yeah, something's being brought up. Something did get shifted there, so whatever that was about, let's just let it go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. And Thank you for listening to me and my crazy stories. And just, pause them if they get too long. I'm really not great at economizing with my words. So, yeah, sending you love. Thank you.